Hello and welcome to Soul Love with Kimness. I am Kim van der Zanden, your host, and I'm super excited to share another episode of Soul Love with you, where we share inspirational and empowering stories from the heart. We talk about the beauty and the shadows as both are part of the ascension journey, to remind you that you are powerful, you are magical, and to have trust in what you feel to be true deep within. Enjoy this next episode of Soul Love. Before we start the next Soul Love conversation, I want to invite you to check out my amazing book, Activating the Flower of Love, a sacred guide for manifesting your deepest desires and highest calling. This sacred book, filled with powerful tools and activations, will guide you to open your heart to the beauty and wisdom within you, empowering you to create the life you deeply desire from the foundation of love. You can find Activating the Flower of Love in all the major online and offline bookstores in ebook or paperback, or you can check it out through my website, kimness.nl, where you can also discover the different ways of working with me and the latest updates on new starting programs. Enjoy this next episode of Soul Love. Welcome everyone to a new episode of Soul Love, and today I'm honored and excited to share a sacred conversation with Alison Haitana, and I hope I pronounce your last name correctly, but I welcome you within this sacred space, and you're joining me, and we're really shifting timelines. You're joining me from New Zealand and I'm in the Netherlands, so it's really almost by the 12 hours, I think, time difference, so welcome. It's amazing what technology can do, so I'm really excited to share this conversation with you, so welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you. Amazing to be here. I'm very excited.
Really is, yeah. I was in I was thinking back in my world trip. I went to New Zealand in 2010.
Oh gosh,
It was so amazing, and it was I really loved all the different elements of nature, but also so amazing to live there, to be in this rawness and having all these elements of the beach, and even the winter in the snow in the mountains and all of that.
Yeah, the winter.
Because it's an important element
diverse
of your work. Yeah.
It is actually, it is. So I work very, I work to a lunar rhythm. So I studied as a shamanic, my shamanic apprenticeship in New Zealand, working with the New Zealand First Light Flower Essences.
Yes.
And so they were essentially the teacher plants that taught me all of these different skills and abilities. And because of the way that the program's actually orientated, it's orientated around the lunar cycles. And so basically there's a 28-day roughly cycle. And so each phase we'd be learning a different aspect of the teacher plant and what the skill and or ability was that we were trying to learn. So it's kind of like the first part was like an introduction where you just get to know each other, you create a relationship. And then the second part was more about the intelligence of the plant, like what skills or what information and wisdom it has to impart on you. And then the third part is the rite of passage. So it's essentially the teacher plant's testing you to see if you've basically picked up and adhered to and embodied that particular wisdom. And then the fourth part, which is kind of towards the last phase, is actually a transpersonal. So it's basically when we're sending the energy of that teacher plant out into the world to kind of vibrate around the world. So that I did that for a very, very long time, very repetitive kind of cyclical pattern for about 8 years.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I've very much kind of, I wouldn't say fallen off, but I've stepped back from the Gregorian kind of solar calendars, and I'm very much keyed in now to the kind of lunar rhythms, which suits me much more, I think. It's one of those things where you discover it, you're like, oh my God, I should have done this years ago. But it just takes a little bit of time to kind of figure it out. So yeah, that's kind of part of how that process worked. And because of, I guess, the way that it's implemented and kind of assisted me in finding my own rhythms within that rhythm, within that cycle. It just makes sense to keep going with it, regardless of whether or not I'm studying with a teacher plant. And so what's essentially happened is that I key the majority of programs or the courses and stuff that I do into the lunar phases. So there's certain things when I start stuff or the astrological cycle. And so it's just, it's an amazing thing. Inherently, I know that we're all made of stardust, we're all stars and stuff like that. But when you when I started walking on this path, working with plant wisdom and the shamanic path, it just blew the doors of my reality kind of open. And one of those things that I figured out was just the sheer wonder of the world and beauty of the world. And looking up at the stars at night is one of the most favorite activities that I can ever do in life. Where I lived in New Zealand, we were very remote. There's no light pollution or anything like that. There were no lights, basically. And so I've grown up around stars most of my life. And when I moved to the city, like for Auckland, for example, in New Zealand, or Melbourne, it shuts out a lot of that kind of light. And what I discovered when I went through the shamanic apprenticeship is that there are different qualities of light, for example. So you've got lunar light, you've got solar light, you've got stellar light and cosmic light. So these are kind of all the different frequencies that we have available to us. And so by humans or people not absorbing like stellar light and cosmic light that comes from the stars, it actually does something to us. I mean, I couldn't quite explain it until you miss out on it, and then you get it and you're like, oh, I can never not be around the stars anymore. And so that was really a fascinating kind of outcome, and just realizing that, you know, we are the stars, we are the planets, and vice versa. Their energy and their beauty and wisdom is formed down via light through the plants, and so then the plants give us the medicine. So it's this really amazing, just like web of life. And I think that's probably the biggest awareness that I had from doing the shamanic apprenticeship. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And I also love in what you're sharing is like by deeply connecting and studying and co-creating and honoring the cycles and discovering more about plants. So in essence, you're going to zoom in to something for some very tangible. It's like something very of this earth, of Mother Earth. But in that you discover the stars, in that you discover your multidimensional self, in that you discover how everything is connected. And I think that's such a beautiful journey. But I'm also wondering, because you said those 8 years, like, do I imagine like you then studying each cycle a different plant, or is it something like, or are there?
Yeah. That's how the program is essentially set up. So I did 8 years. So within that 8 years, there was 5 different programs that I undertook kind of sequentially, one after the other. And so the first one that I did was a 6-month purification and kind of upgrade program. And essentially that was working with orchids, mountain grasses, and I think it was sedges. And that was really, really intense. That was like the first foray into kind of plant medicine. And it was essentially taking a stock essence of this teacher plant, like you did one a week, and it was just like hard and fast, like the lessons were coming left, right, and center. And so that was kind of like a transformational purification program. And then I moved into a healer's certificate, or the healer's apprenticeship, which was 12 months. And that's 12 different teacher plants, one every lunar cycle, going through that kind of cycle that I talked about, you know, creating a relationship, figuring out what the wisdom or the intelligence is, passing the rite of passage, and transpersonal kind of medicine. And so I did that for 12 months. And then I moved into the shamanic apprenticeship, which was 24 months. And so that was really like, it's night and day. Like the when I read my journals from that time frame, because I kept a journal every day, like it's so, I can't even quite describe it. It's almost like, oh my gosh, Alison, you were so just off with the fairies and no idea what was going on with life, kind of thing.
I get that. Yeah, it's
and just
probably such an expanded awareness.
Yeah, totally. And just was so lost during the process, but understood that there was this thread that was kind of carrying me through. And the interesting thing is that when I was doing my shamanic apprenticeship, I actually was pregnant at the same time. And so my son, who is now 6, he went through the apprenticeship with me kind of in vitro. And when he came earthside, it was during a really powerful alchemical kind of transition from maiden to mother. And that rite of passage was essentially facilitated by a teacher plant. I think it was called golden speargrass. And it was essentially the warrior kind of that plant kingdom. And so had I'd planned on having a home birth, but in Melbourne, in Australia, it's actually quite cost prohibitive. So it's about $10,000 roughly for that
Oh,
process
wow.
to happen, because you need to have private midwives, you have to pay for that and all that kind of stuff. It's not subsidized by the government. And
Yeah.
so I decided to get a doula instead and kind of just see how that would pan out in the public system. And the funny thing is I actually ended up home birthing my son anyhow with a doula. And it was so like surreal what was
Mm.
going on. It was like a full-on out-of-body experience. And I remember it was really stormy. There was like a
Yeah.
massive storm because my son's born in July, kind of in the middle of winter here. And it was like thunder and lightning. And I just remember walking into the kitchen, because we've got massive double windows in the kitchen, and
Yeah.
just leaning on the window and looking outside and going, wow, what an amazing time to come through. And I knew, even though it's my first kind of pregnancy and birth, I just knew that I was going to be okay. Like it's a terrifying experience,
Yeah.
but I knew that all my teachers were with me, like i.e. the stack of teacher plants that I work with, but also the principal from the school kind of was there in spirit, as well as a couple of other people, my grandmother and stuff like that. So it was just interesting how I was able to move my ego to the side
Yes.
and just
Yeah.
let the process unfold naturally as it did, with those kind of cascades. They basically call it like a cascade, birthing cascade. Just let it happen how it did. And
And
it
surrendering
made,
to this deeper
yeah,
trust in ourselves and
oh
the
my gosh,
guidance, and
like
also the
there's
wisdom of our body, because I had two
totally,
births, also one at home, and but it's really it's just like this is this sacredness. Then you truly know that this is just a beautiful vessel that we get to co-create with, and that it has so much power and so much wisdom, but it's
I
really going
know,
within, and it's really also honoring what we feel. And I know sometimes there are situations that need something different, but that is also
yes.
part of the journey, sometimes also part of the learning process. But it's really, again, what I love, like you're constantly coming back to nature, but of course our body is also part of nature. It's part of,
Yeah, yeah.
it's really tune
It's,
into
yeah,
that
the
part. And
quintessence of it all kind of
yes,
thing.
yes, that, yeah,
It's brilliant. And because I am naturally, I'm quite analytical, and I'm quite system orientated.
yeah,
I'm very kind of logistical, practical based, really. I actually did a lot of research
mhm,
on um, midwifery, especially obstetrics, gynecology. I read a lot of textbooks. I kind of talked
yeah,
to a lot of people, watched a lot of movies. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. And one of the amazing things that struck me in all of this research is there have been women that have been in like induced comas, essentially. And when the time comes, which is actually it's a very interesting kind of harmonic triggering system that comes from the actual child itself. It's not me. It's the child decides when they want to be born, and it sets off this kind of chain reaction. When women are in comas for whatever reason it may be, and they're pregnant, that actually happens naturally, and the birthing process just
oh wow,
happens. The
yes,
body takes over and
yeah,
actually just does what it needs to do in the time frame that it needs to do. And it was wild. And I
yes,
remember in my head thinking, if I just get out of the way
yes,
enough and not hold on to like whatever it is that I may try and hold on to, if I just get out of the way and let my body do what it needs to do, it'll be okay. It'll be fine.
it is,
And it did happen like that. And I remember I had this funny thought in my head. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired, because it's like towards the end of it, it was like a 12-hour
yeah,
birth from, first contraction to the third stage. And I remember a part being like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm pretty sure everyone's gone through that. Like it's
yeah,
just like, oh my gosh, really? And then it's that one final push kind of thing.
yes.
That's all. Ah,
Yes,
amazing.
it's
I'm
just
like,
at the end
yeah,
of that moment
yeah,
where we think,
totally.
okay, this is actually
Yeah.
yeah.
And it
But
teaches,
I think
taught me
just
a lot. Yeah.
yeah. but sometimes it's funny that you say that, but last week I made an Instagram post and I said, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is surrender or take a step
Oh,
back or is let it
for
go,
sure.
because then we can allow our divine intelligence to take over. We can allow our soul to co-create through us instead of our mind having a fixed idea, whatever it is in life, but having a fixed idea, it needs to happen like this or it needs to look like that, instead of truly allowing our soul to lead and our heart and our wisdom, or wisdom. Yeah, but what I also really
Totally.
loved in your share, and that was like, I know the sun is bringing us codes and the moon and all
Yes.
the elements around it, but somehow I never thought about the stars. In the Netherlands, it's pretty well. There's a lot of light. So I noticed when I was in New Zealand and also when I was in South Africa a couple of years back, and like the enormous stars that you could see there, it was so
Oh my
amazing. The
God.
Milky Way, I've never seen.
Yes, the
We
Milky
have
Way is the
stars here,
best
but
thing.
not in the
Yeah.
amount of stars that you see there. So as you shared that, I really felt like, okay, yes, they're also bringing medicine and remembering and
Mhm.
energy. And when you can fully receive that in places like that, where it's just full nature and there's not so pollution of light, I think that's such a gift to really, yeah. But I also believe we're all on the earth in the place where we are, where we're meant to be to
Yeah.
learn and experience something. But it's such a beautiful awareness how everything is connected. And yeah.
It is. It's amazing. Like I think I've got a newfound, I guess, appreciation and gratitude for stars. So I have been recently researching a lot about celestial navigation. So part of
Mhm.
my ethnicity is Indigenous New Zealander or First Nations New Zealander.
Yeah.
And so part of the South Pacific, but it's just basically anywhere that had water around it. Like, let's not
Yeah.
just say that it was us, it's everyone. Um, Navigated by the stars.
Yes.
And that information, that wisdom, that intelligence is not only always going to be in the stars, but it's in like the DNA, it's in the land, it's in the we call them it's song lines in Australia, but it's a very similar thing on water as well. We call them the whale lines.
Oh, I
It's where
love
the
this. Yeah.
currents move through and connect up all of the different kind of oceanic currents that go
Yeah.
through the world. And it made me realize that there's so much information, but wisdom and intelligence in appreciation, not only just appreciation of like what's above us, but also what's below us and what's around us. But our ancestors who have basically been doing this for kind of millennia,
Yeah.
and knowing that that's what they have and that was their skills and stuff, that they could go from essentially country to country, northern to southern hemisphere, and
Mm.
back around again. It just made me, I created like a star chart out the back
Oh,
because I
really?
kind of wanted to teach my son how to navigate by the stars, just in
Yes.
case he was out in the middle of nowhere and he needed to find home. And so there's certain stars in the southern hemisphere anyhow. I know there are in the northern hemisphere too. Um, they're like fixed stars. And so
Oh,
those fixed stars are essentially the stars that you can pretty much guarantee aren't really going to move a lot.
wow.
And you've
Yes.
got like a clock on the boat,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, and you just navigate by time points. And I think it was 24. Yeah, there's 24
Wow.
different stars at each point.
Yes.
And that's how you can navigate like north, northwest, and all this kind of stuff. So, like, that just like
Yeah.
blows my mind. I'm just like,
Yeah.
this information's all coming back, which is great. I think it's amazing that these old ways are being recontextualized for the
Yeah.
new kind of age that we're living in at the moment. Because I mean, one of the things that I've understood with my journey is that we can't go back to the way that things were.
No.
And that's actually not really what we're meant to do. We're meant to kind of evolve and grow and recontextualize and kind of integrate and embody the things from the past into present moment, in order to live in the present moment. And so part of it is actually realizing that, okay, that's an amazing skill and ability. How can we move that into, for example, the Aquarian age? Like in the age of information, the age of the household and stuff. So that's a lot of the stuff that I do as well too, is look towards the past and figure out ways to kind of integrate or kind of alchemize and create
Yes.
synergy between those
Yeah.
elements and see what that looks like
Yeah.
right now kind of thing. So Yeah,
And I
it's
think it's also so
beautiful.
important to learn, not like technology is beautiful because otherwise we couldn't
Yeah,
have this conversation. But
totally.
in a way, we're also becoming too reliant on it. And I love, as you said, I want my son to be able to navigate on the stars as you live remote and that he can always find his way home. How amazing is that? Because then we're not not dependent on something. We can,
Yes.
there's so much more around us. And I think also sometimes technology takes away the connection truly with our bodies to really listen like, okay, what do I need and what do I feel? And the connection with the elements. And that's what I love in your share and going in deeper connection with nature. There's wisdom, there is knowledge, there is
Hmm.
communication, but sometimes we're so focused on the phone and then everything
Yes,
just shuts down. But there's so much it's everywhere around us. There's magic, there's
it
wonder,
is.
but we need
Yeah,
to be
it's
willing to
everywhere.
open again to,
Yeah.
yeah,
Be
to,
willing to kind of like what you're talking about, surrender and let go.
yes,
Um, and it's, I guess that's, that's the work,
yeah,
the work for many people if they choose to walk this path
mm-hmm.
is that kind of in kind of the shamanic law, it's like walking the razor's path or walking the path of the sword, like walking the middle path, or there's lots of different kind of names for it, but essentially it's having capacity and access to all of this information, all of this wisdom, all of this intelligence,
Yeah,
but at the same time maintaining this kind of harmony and balance within the self, within our own. I love the word. I've heard it from someone, but I don't actually know who they were. But like spiritual technology that we have,
yes,
like this is the vehicle, people.
yeah,
This is the vehicle that we're going to be moving through this experience, and so you really should figure out how it reacts and responds and what its needs are and what it likes to be nurtured and be compassionate to it because it's going to get you a lot of places.
it is.
um, yeah, for much of my life, and this is probably um, pre my kind of training with the teacher plants, and it took quite a while. It probably took me about like maybe 12 months. I was
Mm-hmm.
really ungrounded as an individual. I was very
Yeah,
haphazard. My mind was pretty much running away with everything and governed everything. Whereas walking this path, I've realized that there is a true kind of I don't really want to, like words are really funny for me. I don't particularly like the word master. But there is kind of this true relationship
yeah,
between these elements of like your personality or your ego, your soul, and then kind of higher
yeah,
self, spirit, God, source, however you want to talk to it. So there's actually a relationship between all of these three elements, and the I guess the triggers or the practices over time is to kind of move this relationship so that it does talk to each other,
yeah, yeah,
but that you're taking most of your guidance and kind of information flow is coming from spirit or source. And
yeah,
then it's flowing down into your soul. And then, kind of your personality is like, oh, yeah, okay, cool.
yes,
Run around and do stuff.
it is.
Um, it's essentially flipping
Yeah,
what the kind of cultural context is out there in society. It's essentially hyper individualism, which is very much ego orientated. It's flipping that.
yes,
And that can be really challenging for people. And as with any kind of process where you're reevaluating, I guess, your identity, because a lot of people, for me especially, like your ego and your personality is very connected sometimes to your identity and
yeah, to let
beliefs,
it go. Yeah,
story and stuff. Like
yes,
that's like letting it go. Like, is
yeah,
that even my story? Like, did that come to me? Did I invent it? Did it come to me from friends, family? Like, did I inherit
yeah,
it? Like, there's a lot of questions to ask yourself on this path. And along the way, there's a lot of death, like ego death.
yeah,
But that is kind of the pathway. I mean, there's a saying in kind of shamanism, like 1,000 deaths upon you. And literally, like that is what we wish for you in the most
it is.
amazing kind
Yeah,
of compassionate, loving way, because that is how you're going to become
yeah.
or be, the most embodied self that you can be. And it's a
But
work in
it is because I haven't followed the shamanic path, but more my own guidance path and all beautiful things. But it's each time letting go of layers that are not us, our illusions,
yeah, yeah.
our painful, wounded aspects, harmonizing them with love. And each time we let go of a layer, it's also an ego part, or we identify ourselves with the world around us instead of really loving ourselves for who we are in this inner light. So it's a returning to our pure self, and it
Mhm.
doesn't matter if in the shamanism, they call it something different. Or
Yeah.
and what I also loved in your share, because I always keep sharing to people, because you have, I found that so beautifully. You shift from the ego and to allow the soul or the divine to guide us. But I also notice sometimes in spiritual practices, we sometimes aim for going higher and higher, and that's really beautiful. But in the end, our quest is, yes, ascend higher, but also descend back into your body, back into your wisdom, anchoring that light into who you are and embodying that in everything you do, in your conversations, in every interaction, because otherwise it will always be a beautiful thing in meditation, but then it doesn't change anything in our lives. It's again with, in the old paradigm way, having a lot of knowledge, but not knowing how to work with it. And that's the same with these divine technologies. So I'm also curious, like, how did you, because you had such an intense training, how did that shift your everyday life? Like, if you now see, like, okay, how is it, have you evolved, or as these different identities let go, and as you connected in more profound ways, how has it changed your,
it's there's probably innumerable ways that it's changed my life. Like when I look back to the Alison, like, 100 personalities ago, kind of, 100 deaths ago, 1,000 deaths ago, however many it was, like there was a certain sense of, I guess, hardness to me. Like I kind of equate it as being like a square instead of like an oval or something like that. There's a certain sense of hard edges, and a lot of it was just protection or the layers, the things on the outside that I thought I'd create via my personality, which would be things like, for me, for my personality and the way that I walk, like anger is the very quickest reaction that I have to sometimes to some things. Instead of responding and pausing, if I react, if I'm tired or something like that, it always is anger first. And so I have been able to, over time, narrow the gap between reaction and awareness. And it takes practice. Like it's with everything that we do, it's not a one and done thing. It takes practice. You're building the muscle, you're practicing. You're also at the same time, because I think this is something sometimes that people can fall into, is this kind of trap or this kind of despair that you can sometimes fall into of, it's the not good enough, or the worthies, the value, that all of that kind of thing kind of comes in. It's just your ego talking, really. And I think the thing is, like, it doesn't want to die. This is no one wants to die, really. But your ego, it will do anything to survive. And what it does is it throws out these horrible internal monologues that you may have about yourself, or that you may pick up on this really random thing that somebody said and you just repeat it over and over and over again. So it's more than anything for me, it was actually noticing these things. So the first thing is noticing it, or having awareness of it. And then there's the question, do I want to change this behavior? And it's either yes or no. You can have a maybe. And then it's like, okay, what am I going to do? So you just slowly work through the process. And once you've done it enough times, it does get easier, and it does get quicker, and they can be instantaneous over time. Like there are many shifts of perspective for me that happen. And I think it's just because of my personality again. Like I'm a talker. Like I will have a conversation with anyone, and I visualize my perception or things changing. Like really, for me, as like an individual, it happens in conversation. So I have a very active mind. It's out in lots of different places, and lots of thinking, lots of different things at multiple times. And this is kind of the embodied component to it, like when I actually sit down and I have a conversation with somebody, for example, like how we're doing today, what will happen is all of these cogs kind of fall into place, and it becomes solid. Like there's this kind of solidity and real like groundedness to the perception that I'm coming to awareness in. And I'm just like, so I catalyze information in conversation. And I catalyze intelligence, and like, so there's data, there's information, and then there's kind of wisdom and gnosis. Those are kind of like the pathways, I guess, of like information and embodiment. And like when I get that kind of information, when all the clogs click together and it just, the pathway comes through, I'm like, oh, that's what it is. For me, it generally happens in conversation.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's, I guess, why I'll hermit quite a lot. So my tendency usually is to hermit, because I'm very kind of, I pull back from everything and I just kind of think and study and be like, go into basically the darkness within, the shadow, subconscious, unconscious, all of those kind of spaces, and try and clear out or find, like, it's like a little mission, like a little adventure. Find that, generally, not always, it's a fear, and tend to that fear. And I mean, some people say, invite the fear to dinner, have a conversation with it. Like, these are things that you can do.
Yeah.
And that's generally what I do, but I write as well too. So I write a lot of information that comes out. So yeah, it's a lifelong journey. Like, I've got amazing skills and abilities and things like that. But the reality for me anyhow is that they all need to be practiced all the time. So, now I have these skills and abilities and discernment, kind of like, clear cognizance and stuff like this. And, talking with plants, like, you need to continue to do that. And once I've noticed on going through this path, like, if I kind of, sit to the side too much and I fail to kind of like interact or engage with nature, I start to get really unwell. And it can be quite quick as well too. So that's when I realize, okay, I'm too much in my head. I need to go outside, lie on the grass, pet the dog, play with that kind of thing. So
but it's only
a lifelong thing.
Yeah. Oh no, I love that, because it's only through your awareness that you're listening to the subtle message of your body. We all get these messages when we feel when we're out of alignment, or only sometimes we are so out there, or we are so disconnected that we don't even see them anymore, or we find it very inconvenient because we want to do a lot of things. So it's so true, because a lot of us are being called back to nature in whatever way that is guiding us. So you then feeling like, okay, I notice when I go out of this, and it's a muscle, like with everything.
Totally is.
It's a muscle we need to practice. We need to give attention. We need to give love. We need to do it. But I think just in general, us coming back to our pure self and being on this journey, that is a daily commitment. It is a constant commitment to our heart and to what we feel, and to our greatest version that we're here to bring in this world. And that can look in many ways, but it's you truly honoring. And I also love what you share, because most of the time it's fear that is triggering us, but there's wisdom. There is something that wants to be expressed, that wants to be acknowledged. And when we do that, it opens up the energy and more of our capacities come online. But it's only when we're willing to be in the darkness or in the stillness or it's also the space of the void of creation. So it's sometimes, it's really opening ourselves up to something greater that we can't really immediately see with the ego mind or with so I think that's really, really beautiful.
And it's interesting. Like, I used to watch a lot of TV as a kid, basically. Like, I'm a child of the 80s, and I was brought up on like lots of movies and stuff like that. And one of the sayings in particular that I have like carried with me throughout my lifetime is a saying from Anne of Green Gables. And I think it was can't remember the guy's name, but he said it, and he was just like, just remember, Anne Shirley, every day is brand new. There's no mistakes in it. Just go out and do what you need to do. And that's the thing. Like, you from like a shamanic or animalistic kind of animalism kind of perspective, when you go to sleep, you die, and then you are reborn again. And so there's ample opportunities if you kind of open your heart to see them. There's ample opportunities for change and transformation just within your normal mundane life. That's the thing. Like, you can add things on top of it. Like, everything can be a ritual, and I think that's also a part of maybe the kind of sickness, I guess, in the world, or kind of like this dis-ease. A lot of it is just that we've forgotten how to be kind of reverent with our lives, amongst the kind of practicality of washing dishes. Like, anything can be a ritual. And when you start to build that kind of understanding and awareness about just how magical you are to be alive, to be doing these things, to be cutting onions, for example, and crying. Like, that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And when you start to kind of reclaim, because that's kind of what it is, like the modern world wants to separate you as much as possible from the beauty of who you are.
Yeah.
Like when you start to reclaim that and you start to see it, like life is just really different. It's just really different. And you start to see with your heart, and you start to see the beauty not only in yourself but in the people around you and the surroundings around you, and it does create like a shift, a massive shift in perspective from this one kind of the individual to this kind of hierarchy. It's not a hierarchy, it's a hierarchy. And so it's creating, that's essentially what community is. It's being able to kind of have relationships with people and individuals, not only, people, but also animals, plants, the water and the water bodies and stuff around you, and creating these relationships and nurturing these relationships. And also, asking for help if you need that as well too, from these particular relationships that you've nurtured over time. I think even prior to my shamanic apprenticeship, I was very much, I would go to nature to ask a question, or I'd go to the river because I grew up around a river and a waterfall. And so I would go to the water to ask the questions, to ask for guidance, to ask for information. Like it just struck me sometimes only when I get like a little bit older, like, why would I ask a person? Like, I just ask my mum kind of thing, Mother Nature, Gaia. And she will help me in the most, profoundly kind of sometimes, confusing way, but it's always information that's really important.
But it's still very natural and pure. I think a lot of I know it's when I always asked questions to the wind when I was a little girl,
Oh
and
my God,
somehow
I love talking to the wind. It's
I loved, oh
amazing.
yeah, but somehow we disconnect from that because we don't see grown-ups do that. But I think when young children are so pure, like they still know that there's wisdom, that there's communication, that they get an answer, not maybe in the 3D way of, okay, you get a text message, but you get an answer in the deep knowing in yourself. And what I really love about what you're sharing is inviting us to come back to the sacredness of life. When you're cooking dinner, you're alchemizing and honor
Oh
the
my gosh,
sacredness.
it
When
totally
you're
is. Like, how can you not?
yes,
I don't know. I that's what I say, like to myself. How can you not know that you're literally creating magic?
yes,
Like you're
yes.
adding all of these individual ingredients in together, and then shabam, it's like
Yeah.
this beautiful kind of feast. Like that's
Yes,
alchemy.
it is. Yes, yeah, and it's coming back to that wonder. Okay, like we possess that power within us, but also our words are also alchemy. We
Yes.
choose to translate energy, inspiration into physicality, into words, and those words create a ripple in the atmosphere, and that is transforming everything around us. And it's really that's
Totally.
so. Thank you for bringing that back even more fully, like the connection with plants, the connection with because everything is sacred and everything is connected, and we have so many abilities to tune in with that. But I think it's also important, as you shared, and sometimes that's difficult, but you really choose to be in this space of deep stillness. Because I believe you can only get in true communication with that when you honor that time. Because then the
Yes.
mind gets silence, and then we can truly tune into the energy instead of, and then we go into
The
to a deeper
chatter.
layer.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, totally.
And that's a
That's I think the
commitment.
beauty of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
totally is. And it's a practice, and some days will be easier than others, and others will be very, very challenging. And you may need to mix it up every now and then. Like because of I think my clear, so I'm clear cognizant and clairvoyant, so I see a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And so because of it, like meditation is what was kind of sold to me back
Yes.
in the day. Sitting there quiet, blank mind kind of, I could never do it. And so because of it, I would beat myself up a lot of the times about it. And then it's not until I realized that you're actually going against your nature. Like your nature is to see. And
Yeah.
so you're going to see when you're in these quiet, still spaces. Like it's just like it's kind of like being in a vortex where all this information is just coming at you. And you figure out in a way like how you work, like how your technology is kind of orientated, and you can key into these things. But it just takes, I guess, more than anything, like a willingness, a curiosity, just the opportunity, I guess, to, you know, take time for yourself, to do these things if you choose them to be important. And that's also the other thing, like, you know, it's choice. We have free will for a reason. I think, you know, it must be very annoying sometimes to kind of higher self, but like it's a choice as well too. And also making no choice is a choice. I mean, that's also another thing as well. Yeah.
Otherwise, our subconscious programs, they choose for us. So
yes, they totally do.
Not,
they totally do.
Yeah. I think it's really beautiful. Thank you. I think it's amazing. And I want to invite everyone, if you want to learn more about Alison, to check out the information in the bio, your links and all of that below this video or audio, whatever way you're tuning in. And I want to invite you, like, if there was one suggestion, advice, tip you would want to share with everyone tuning in this now moment, what would it be?
I would probably say, like, go outside and look up, like, you know,
Yes.
look up into the sky, whether that is during the day or at night. You know, just look up into the sky and kind of reclaim the wonder of life.
Yes. I love that. I get goosebumps. Yes, for that.
Yeah.
Yes, I love it. I'm waiting for the winter, because in the winter, when it's very cold, we have most of the time the most clear skies in the Netherlands. So we're now still in the summer. So I'm waiting for the winter time, and then yes.
And it gets quite like thin, like crisp and thin kind of in the atmosphere, doesn't it? Because you get the auroras as well. Do you see the
Yes,
aurora?
sometimes we have, since I think 2 years, we have like the Northern Lights. Well, they're coming here in beautiful purples, and yes, so that's amazing. I haven't seen them yet. Sometimes there is this alert and I'm sitting the whole night, but then we live in such an area with a lot of light, so it's But one day I hope to see that as well.
For sure.
Yes.
Awesome.
So I want to thank you for sharing your light and for taking the time, because for you it's almost midnight. So for taking the time to having this conversation now. And everyone tuning in, I want to thank you for being here, and please let us know what sparked for you. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the next Soul Love podcast. So for now, much love and see you soon. Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you for joining this episode of Soul Love. If you want to find out more about what we do, you can find it below. And I'll see you in the next episode. Much love.